and Albert Cozzi. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me up here.
Thank you, John, for inviting us.
All right, brothers in arms. You know, I'm in a family business. I have a brother. We have separated duties. My brother runs our recycling and demolition. I run the equipment. So we have real separation. What's your secret sauce? How's the success? How did you survive all these years?
Well, I think part of it is that we kind of do some of the same things. There is a separation. Frank has always been the operational guy. As we grew up through the business, I was kind of the outside guy, the sales guy. I was the guy that was face forwarding to the public, so I kind of got a lot of credit for building the business, but the truth is Frank and other family members were the ones that were doing all the work, building the business up and putting it together.
Yeah, and Albert's always had the philosophy that he'll get the business, we make good deals.
All right, there you go. You know, now I visited your yard, and you had, this was well before the computerization of the roll-off tracking, and you had this big board, as big as this thing, of tracking every roll-off bin in Chicago and the greater Chicagoland. I was impressed, and your yard was absolutely spotless, clean for the time. Do you think our industry is still stuck in the old ways, or are you seeing more and more people starting to understand cleanliness, environmental stewardship, safety, and organization? Is it playing more of a part, or do you still think we're back in the Stone Ages?
I think there's a lot of members that are still in the Stone Ages. I think that having had to work in mud up to my knees for the first several years of my career, that is what led me to be more of a clean freak and place for everything in its place, and you got to be able to clean up after yourself.
I agree. Albert, what say you?
Well, I think that the companies that are successful are the ones that run clean, neat, well-organized businesses. And, with technology today, even if they don't have the opportunity to travel, one of the things that Frank and I did early on is we could see what was happening with the EPA and the environmental issues. So we went to Germany and to Denmark and Belgium and looked at what was happening as far as the restrictions that they had to operate under. Now people don't need to do that. They can watch John Sacco and his YouTube channel and see how important it is to run a clean facility and to have counterweights that aren't scratched up. And I've always been a believer that in order to be successful, you got to kind of plagiarize the best. Well, one of the things that we've certainly plagiarized is what you're doing with
yeah, but it's been in your family culture, Albert. Look, I've been to your yard long time ago, man, when I was just getting started, getting to know people at ISRI back in the mid-90s. And so I remember going to your yard. Like I say, it was impression because the amount of volume, look, at the time at our yard in Sierra back in the mid-90s, if we did 2,500 a ton, that was a lot. You guys were handling megatons. I mean, you guys were one of the biggest at the time.
Well, we used to ship, when we had the family business, between 100 and 120,000 ton a month right out of Chicago. But we learned that, first of all, like I remember going on a trip to London and visiting some EMR scrapyards there, and they said something that hit home. They said the difference between American operations and British operations is we run the same type of equipment, we process the same type of scrap, but the Americans work in the mud and the British won't. And you find that there's a lot of trade-offs. When we started hard surfacing yards, you found that the equipment stayed cleaner, the trucks moved through the yards faster, you could go to a different size material handler on rubber to get around. And there's a lot of benefits to running a clean operation. Plus, it's a branding issue. You want people to be proud of where they work, and nobody wants to work in a junkyard, for lack of a better term.
So Frank, you and I've heard this from you, talking about your grandfather, what they said, working at junk business. Walk us through this and where we are now, from what you heard growing up to what we are now.
Well, my grandfather was a junk man. My dad was a scrap dealer. I'm a recycler. It's come, volumes have changed. I mean, it's just a different world if you're doing it right.
To go back when you were handling 120,000 ton a month, were you top 5 in America at that time?
Well, probably. I mean, we were one of the largest regional scrap processors.
This was well before consolidation ever even came to our industry.
Although we got that size from consolidating our region.
Okay.
We had acquired a lot of companies, but it was before you had the public consolidation that went on, and the consolidation that's done by the steel industry. So, yeah, there were, I would say, as far as total tonnage, there were some companies like Hugo New and people like that probably handled more tons than we did in the Proler family. But I would say we were certainly in the top 10.
So Albert, you said it early that you were more of the face, whereas Frank was operations. And you made a quote, there was a quote in AMM that scrap was going to $200 a ton. You took a lot of heat for that comment. What was that like? I mean, you took a lot of heat for that.
Well, yeah, I did, but I remember when I went to the University of Chicago, I had an economics professor that said, you can predict what or when, but never the two together. And I made the mistake of predicting when and what, and I was right with the what, but not with the when. It happened afterwards. But when it did happen, I think the steel mills all wished that I was right, because it didn't go to $200 a ton. It went to $600 a ton, $800 a ton for prime scrap. So it went way above that. But prior to that, when I made the prediction, scrap historically never traded for more than $100 a ton. And I can remember selling scrap by barge when we were getting $60 a ton delivered for prime grades. So
yeah, that's an evolution. And if you think about, we're not supposed to talk pricing, if you will, but when you talk values today, those are numbers that are like bad numbers, if you think about it. We would consider, I don't know, the market's not that good. So Frank, you and I have had the honor and privilege to be chairperson of this great trade association. And here we are in this convention hall, the biggest show of all time. What's your thoughts as you look back from when you were chairman to look out here and to see the things that we're doing, live podcasting and the video screens everywhere? What do you think?
It's a world of change. We go back, talking about price of scrap, I'd just like to say that when we both started, we were truck drivers. When I started with the company, we had 11 employees, 5 of them were named Cozzi. Driving a truck, I can remember the day when we were selling scrap off the truck to other dealers for $12 a ton.
That's crazy.
And to see where it's gone. And when I was chair of ISRI, I take full credit for what happened to the market. It went up to $900 a ton, went to $450 a pound for copper, and then George Adams came.
Yeah, and poor George is not even here to defend himself, but he was the prince of the down market, right? But yeah, so what's your thoughts though, Frank? You look at the convention now, being chair and all that. Well, what's your thoughts?
It's amazing. The size of the expo has gotten enormous. I mean, we did have, I think our biggest the attendance while I was chair was like 5,600, and you see what we're doing today.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. This is there seems to be a lot more energy. What about you, Albert? You look. I see you at shows. I've seen you at Waste Expo. I've seen you at Scrap Expo, BIR. You know, we've seen each other in a lot of different shows and around the world. What's your thought now when you come see this?
Well, you know, I go to like the demolition contractor show. This is so much better attended and has so much more that you can get exposed to. That, you know, I learn a lot when I go to these shows. You know, talking to different vendors, you find out what's new and what's happening with technology, whether it's computer technology or technology of all this beautiful iron that's out here. But you know, I'm just amazed. I expected to see basically the same thing at this show that I saw last year, and there's so much more there. I mean, I could spend 3 days talking to people at this.
So, you know, that's interesting. I know something about you brothers because I've seen you in different places. Education, learning. You got your Harvard, you went to Harvard for a post-grad. Tell us about that, because that's education too.
Yeah, well, it's called the Owner-President Management Program. It's a program where I was in with 100 other guys that were all presidents of their own company, mostly owned their own companies. And it's a hell of an education when you can learn from people in different industries. Now, a lot of those, this was back in 89 through 91, I was there, and there were a lot of software companies there at the time. But what you can learn from other people that have the experience of running any kind of business, I mean, whatever you can draw from them is a benefit.
So, Albert, you and I 2 years ago were in Louisville at Scrap Expo, and you attended a session I did, and it was about how on maintenance, because I own and operate our own yard in Bakersfield, and of course we sell equipment. But what you found was it was like a presentation that made sense to you. And my question isn't about the presentation; it's about, are you finding more exchanging of information nowadays than it was back in the early 90s, late 80s, where people really didn't share what they knew? What's your experience with that?
Well, I don't know that people are more willing to share than they were in the past. Today when we were at the general session and the people that received the Lifetime Achievement Awards, they were talking about their mentors. And, you know, I had a lot of mentors in the industry too, and learned a lot. But today there is so much more to learn. You know, the technology has moved so much quicker. I mean, you know, when I started, we were breaking cast iron with a sledgehammer. You know, so there wasn't a lot of technology to it. And,
go ahead.
And before all of the technology came into play, before I came to work full time, I can remember when I was 15 years old. I was a big kid, and Albert took me out and bought me a suit, a couple of shirts, and a tie, and put me in the street. He would take me to industrial districts. I didn't have a car. I wasn't old enough to drive. He dropped me off in an industrial district, and we had a handful of cardboard flyers that we put.
So you got a little brother out there. Let's go, huh?
Well, yeah, and you know, you mentioned how we work together as brothers. You know, I think that's a good example. I always came back and picked him up
at lunchtime.
Well, I don't know. I think today, hey Frankie, we're going to drop you off over here.
One morning, he dropped me off in an industrial district on the south side of Chicago, and it poured that day. And the only suit I had was a Robert Hall suit. It cost about $20 at the time. It shriveled up from the rain.
Oh, well, those are great starts. So let's talk about the future now. You're both of you are still in it. You're still in the industry. It's like you're not going to go away. Meaning you're not going to retire to nothing.
We don't know anything else to do.
Yeah, well, and they say this is a business where you get rust in your blood. and you do, and love it, and nothing makes me happier to see the progress that our next generation that's coming up, that they're making, that they're learning. And one of the things that I view my role as to try to make sure that they don't make the same mistakes that Frank and I made 40 and 50 years ago.
And that was another advantage, Albert talked about sharing information. It's not likely that you get a lot of people in your own neighborhood or your own city to share information with you, but guys like George Adams and Scott Newell and traveling around the world with him and to other shipyards. I think the biggest benefit is learning from other people's mistakes. We've learned a lot from our own mistakes, but learning from other people's mistakes is an advantage that don't cost you a lot.
So we were talking before we sat down about the challenge of employment. And I got asked this question on the podcast earlier this morning about it. What do you see? I mean, how are you going to fill the ranks from these people that have been loyal to the Cozzi family, if you will, that have been working for you for 40 years? Where's that transition? Where are you finding the people?
It's tough. We're having a hard time hiring from metal sorters to equipment operators. We're fortunate that we've got a great stable crew by and large. It's impossible to hire truck drivers. The turnover in the new hires of truck drivers is just astronomical. And this isn't a business where somebody goes and gets an MBA and comes out, or an engineering degree, and can make a contribution right away. It's a unique business. They've got to learn it. And so it's difficult getting managers. So, I mean, I joke the only way we're going to survive the problem of getting new managers is Frank's going to have some more kids.
Well, that's not likely to happen at my age, but I do have some grandkids that I'm looking forward to bringing around. Mentorship programs are important, and it's something that we've put a big emphasis on lately. And I got to tell you, John, and I'm not blowing smoke here, this repurposed program that you've put out, I think is going to help everybody be able to hire the right kind of people when they learn what this business really is.
Well, when they learn, see, the way I see it is the impact about what we do. It seems like it's been a secret. The younger generation want to make a difference on the planet, and you can't make no greater impact of reducing the carbon footprint than working in our industry. Without us, there is nothing. And I think that message is going to resonate with people who want to come to work. The young kids, well, why do I want to work in the recycled materials industry? They don't want to work in the junk business, but if they're going to work in the recycled materials industry that's saving CO2 emissions and it's saving our natural resources, well, I think we have a different game. I think we have a different sales pitch to those people. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that is... You want to add something?
No, go ahead.
No, okay. So, I think that is, how we go out there, how we recruit, and, grandkids. So tell us, how many Cozzi siblings now are working in the business?
We're still at 5 or 6. I don't count myself because I don't work that hard anymore. But I've got
what are you, the consigliere?
Yeah, that's it. I've got 2 sons and 2 nephews that we're going to have to take the next step.
What do both of you want to see happen with our industry in the next 5 years? You go first, Albert.
Oh boy, that's a tough question. I'll echo what Frank said about the repurposed videos. I think it's the best thing that's happened in the industry as far as a tool to make the public aware of what we do. And I think it is going to change the perception of what the industry is. As I remember recently, There was a fire at a scrap yard, and obviously everybody's having problems with lithium-ion batteries and fires. There was a fire at a scrap yard in Canada, and the mayor shut the yard down and said, "We don't want that business in this area. Matter of fact, that business should not exist in any area." And I think something like Repurposed is going to change that philosophy.
What about you? What do you want to see change in the next few years?
I think Val hits the nail on the head. I think the social media stuff that you and a few other people are doing will help get the message out to people that we're not the bad guys, that we're more of a part of the solution to the problem than the cause of the problem.
All right, so we're going to wind down here, but my thoughts are about in the steel sector, there's a lot of new production coming online. And from the time when you were young men driving trucks, where the Gary, Indianas, and the Chicago mills, and you've seen mills now, the flow of recycled iron is in a lot of different places. What's your thought on all this new production coming on, and is it sustainable to consume it or not?
Well, I remember another thing that I learned at the University of Chicago was the only cure for high prices is higher prices, and the only cure for low prices is lower prices. The market will balance out based on what the demand, and it appears that demand is going to go up. But don't forget, even though this demand is going to be from basically scrap utilizing electric furnaces, that there are substitutes for scrap, and which will tend to cap how much scrap metal will go up. But I do expect that all the additional demand, because it's electric furnaces, you're going to see increased prices for all of the inputs that go into those operations, whether it's scrap or it's pig iron or DRI, that there's going to be more demand. Now, whether the amount of steel that we use tends to be about the same, so whether that the demand ends up being centralized in the United States, where is the who's going to lose market share by the additional 15 million tons coming on? Is it going to be other domestic mills, or is it going to be mills overseas? If it's mills overseas, probably a large share of what we're currently exporting will end up staying domestically.
Interesting. Frank, what's your thoughts?
I agree with what Al's saying. The capacity of steelmaking capacity, the way it's projected to grow, is going to benefit the industry, I think, to some extent. Whether we'll be able to fill all those needs domestically is a question in my mind.
Well, we always hear, we are in an election cycle here in America. Doesn't matter what party you're in, we always hear the same thing. Infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. Without recycled iron, there is no infrastructure, because there's the new steel that's needed for rebar, the rebar, the plate and all that. Are we really ever going to see this infrastructure happen? I mean, there's a lot of roads, bridges, and ports that need upgrading in this country. What's your thoughts? Final thoughts on this?
Well, I saw a statistic that and I could be off by a decimal point, that for every $1 billion worth of investment in infrastructure meant another 50,000 ton of steel capacity, which is going to, since most of that steel capacity tends to be long products for infrastructure, is going to mean that for every $1 billion spent, there's going to be demand for 50,000 ton more of scrap or scrap substitutes. But when are they going to do it? Who knows? I mean, I know all of the money's been appropriated, but it doesn't seem to me like they're starting to replace much of the airports and roadways and bridges. Although, like you, I fly a lot, and I don't think I've been in an airport anywhere in the world where they weren't working on it anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Frank, your thoughts?
As far as that goes, I don't think Al said it all, but I do want to mention one thing about this trade association.
Absolutely.
And whatever name it goes by. I've been around long before ISRI. I was the chairman of the Transportation Committee for ISIS back in the 80s. I've seen the farewell to ISIS, and now we're seeing a farewell to ISRI. I think that we've come, it's just grown by leaps and bounds. I think we've developed a staff, particularly in our communications department, that is just phenomenal. When I was chair of ISRI, we had one guy in our communications department, and we weren't able to get the message out the way we should have. But now they're doing it, and with your help, I think it's going to make a big difference.
I think it's all of us. I think all of us play the role in it. This podcast being shared, people listening, people coming here. I think we all play a role. And I think the more we're seeing more and more of it, it's my hope that for me in the next 5 years, finally this industry in America will be deemed essential, and that we will now have a seat at the table with regulators versus being on the menu with the regulators. That's what my hope is, and I think by changing the way, words matter, it just matters how we talk about it. And, from your perspective, and a man who, like I said, when you came out and said what you said back in the 90s, you took a lot of heat for that. Those were words, oh my God, how dare Albert Cozzi say that. I mean, I remember that. But I think now the words, as we're more cohesive in our message, we've never been this cohesive. And I think the words now that we use as a larger group will make change come faster to the benefit of our industry. That's my thought.
I agree.
Well, gentlemen, it's an honor to sit here with the brothers Cozzi. I've always, look, you were the chairman when I was a young officer, and you mentored me with that. I don't know where in the world we're going to run into. Let's see, we had Rome train station, right. Scottsdale shows. Somewhere in the world we're going to run into each other again, huh, Albert?
Well, just pick a nice place.
How about Amalfi in June?
I'll be there.
He's going to be there.
All right, so am I. When?
Mid-June. I don't remember exactly.
Oh, we need to talk. We might be in the same place. Wouldn't that be funny?
I'm going to be in Italy the entire month of June, so I'll come down and visit you guys.
Would love it. Are you really?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'll open it up for a quick question because I got Susie coming up next. Anybody got a question for the brothers? Come on, somebody's got to have something for these guys.
No, we stubbed them.
We stubbed them. Frank, Albert, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.